Yeah, and welcome. My name is Brett Papa, and today we're going to learn how to add 10 years of melody making awesomeness to your playing in 10 minutes. And we're going to do it in a major pentatonic context, which is pretty tough for a lot of people. I know it drove me crazy because I was like, how do I use this freaking scale? Well, let's learn, shall we? So I'm going to take my standard choice of key, which is A, because it's awesome. Even has the, first letter. A, awesome. Never mind. Okay, so typically when we solo, it's like, you got to learn this scale, right? And you're like, okay, I'll learn the scale. And then magic's going to happen. I'm going to just be this awesome soloist. Not so much. What people don't teach you is why you learn that scale. It's a good idea to also memorize where the chord is inside that scale. Let me give you an example. So, A major pentatonic. So far, it's just a scale. Okay. Now, if I took that and I started to learn where are my A chords or A chord tones in that scale, a lot of stuff happens. Okay, so it helps to know all the different shapes of the chords, right? But, for instance, that note, it's the A note itself. So if we took an A major chord and made it look like this, got a note here, here, okay? So those are all chord tones right off the bat. So now it's more than just a scale. It's actual notes that you use to create a melody, okay? Now you also have this chord shape right here. Those notes are all right there. So we got... You also have these two notes, which are part of the second position, or this A chord up here, okay? Now, the reason why I say that is I want you to pay attention to the chord tones in the scale. We go over this a lot, but this is really the key to making melody. So, learn the A major pentatonic scale, but then take that next step and find all those A chords in that scale and just work from, say, the D string down. That'll be the easiest and most practical method when you start. So if I take this, those notes is in RN, position 1. I have this version of an A chord right there in position 2 and 3, so, right? In position 3 and 4, I have this shape of an A chord. So position 3. In position 4. Now it's also good to learn, once you learn those shapes, what note value it is, whether it's the root, the third, or the fifth of each chord. That's good too, because then once you start to associate what intervals sound like, it helps you to be able to call up while you're playing, improvising live, let's say, from this to this easier, because you're like, oh, I like the sound from a fifth to, the root or whatever. So it gives you more options, but that's not super important. Right now, just learn where those chords are. So here, position 1, position 2 and 3. Position 3 and 4. Now, where does this go? Check this out. So to be melodic, you want to make something that's kind of like a song or a melody, right? Well, check this out. If I take those shapes, but I really focus on those chord tones, instead of taking something that sounds like... Oh gosh, am I hitting notes I like? Yeah, those notes are in there, but it doesn't sound very deliberate. Now, if you were to go like... That's a lot more melodic. And how did I do that? Well, I just, again, paid attention to those chord tones. And sometimes I played all 3 notes right in a row. So when I did, I played literally every note on my A chord. Okay, now this put me in position 2, where this is. Okay, so I went. Now, I know when I'm playing over a major chord, I love the sound of a suspended 4th. So I added an extra note to our scale. Right? But I basically was working out of this right here. 6th fret G, 5th fret B, 5th fret A, because those are all target notes. And I like this sound, those 2 notes together, so I let it ring. Back into traditional A chord, and then I went right back into where this A is. Right, and I hit another chord tone there. So now the scale shape is becoming less important, and the chord within that is starting to be where it's at to develop our melody. So right there, I just took a very simple exercise of taking the 3rd position in major pentatonic, or A major pentatonic, did that same thing. I mean, that's literally as close as you can get to going. But since I did it in this way and hit all the chord tones first, it doesn't sound like a scale. It sounds like a melody. Now I'm going to take this and go into the next position, but with this in mind. Okay, so I hit another tone here and then back to the root right here. So right, and now I've created a melody. When I bent up here, I bent into this A chord right here. This is the 3rd, so right, that's what that note sounds like. That's the 3rd of the A chord. Very cool sound together. So we went all over the whole fretboard. We can go. Right? So now what we're doing is we're creating much more melodic content just because we're paying attention to that A chord, where that A chord is in those scale shapes. That's everything when it comes to being melodic, right? So when you use repetition, you know, you start off with a melody in a certain way. I go back to that same starting point. It's kind of a call and response thing, which helps when you're creating, you know, your melodic story or whatever it is that you're building. Now, if you take that one step further, that was all just over an A, right? Right? So it really went with that open A string. It all sounded very melodic, very nice. Okay? Now, if you go to the next step and say our next chord was that G, well, I'm doing the same thing. I'm finding those exact same things we just did. Okay, so I got a G here, and since I know my A chord was here, all I got to do is whoop, go down a whole step, and I got my G. So this is where things like double stops come into play. So you got now you can come up, right? I'm adding a note to my pentatonic scale, but it's because this chord shape now is falling inside of it, so that gives me access to other notes because that chord's there, so that must mean Those notes are accessible, okay? So we got... double stop, right? Because I'm going A to G, D, right? If I did that, we would have when I went to that D chord, I decided to use the D here. So I went right into position 2 again, where both the G, so this is position 2, major pentatonic, that G chord was right there. The D chord's right here. My A chord's right here. Right? I mean, I just played the notes of the chord within this little scale shape. But G, D, back to A. Do G again. D, back to A. So it really takes that melodic content or that aspect that everybody's searching for, right? When we learn or are learning how to solo, but we come at it from the wrong way of thinking. Yes, we have to learn the scale, but oftentimes, and I know that's where I stopped thinking about it, right? Was I know the scale shape, so therefore I solo. Scale, therefore you solo. Yeah, until there's a band. And then there's other chords, and then it becomes more complicated. Because then you are actually beholden to something. And so, when you can take the pentatonic scale, major in particular, which is melodic awesomeness, and throw those little chord inversions from the G string down into your shape, you get all that cool stuff, all that melodic. So that is the key. The key is really, really paying attention to where those chords are in your scale and not just the scale. So I promise, spend 10 minutes a day on that for the next week and you will be much more melodic. All right, thanks for tuning in. Catch you next time.